everyone, and welcome back to the Can We Keep Up podcast, where we unpack how U.S. diplomats are responding to China's increased influence in Latin America and the Caribbean. In 2013, China launched its Belt and Road Initiative, a multi-trillion-dollar global infrastructure and economic development project. This episode will be focusing on Jamaica in order to analyze Chinese increased investment in Caribbean trade infrastructure, with a particular focus on maritime trade and ports. To provide some context, China has full operational control of Jamaica's largest port, the Port of Kingston, which lies in close proximity to the Panama Canal. Additionally, the China Harbor Engineering Company constructed a 66-kilometer road connecting Ocho Rios and Kingston, known as Jamaica's North-South Highway. Here to speak to us more about the situation is Ambassador Luis Moreno. Ambassador Luis Moreno is a career member of the Foreign Service, who served as ambassador to Jamaica from 2014 to 2017. Ambassador Moreno has served in various postings in the Western Hemisphere, Middle East, Europe, and Washington, including 3 postings as Deputy Chief of Mission in Tel Aviv, Port-au-Prince, and Madrid. Thanks for joining us today, Ambassador Luis Moreno.
My pleasure, Amanda.
Just to start us off, can you explain a little bit about what it was like to serve as ambassador to Jamaica? What were your key priorities at the time?
Well, there were several priorities, but you mentioned the Chinese, so I'll take that one last. Jamaica is a much more complicated place than people think. It's very complex. There's a tremendous problem. There's public corruption. There's gang violence, and there's the beauty of the people and the beauty of the country. And there's a massive U.S. presence as far as tourism goes. It's the major asset of the Jamaican economy, and it's a critical point of our bilateral relationship. It's also expanding economically. It's really coming into its own. They really kind of turned the corner. Fortunately, the hurricanes have kind of set that back a little bit. But also highly involved in multilateral issues in the Caribbean as part of CARICOM. They have a natural leadership portion of CARICOM. We were emphasizing very much trying to get Jamaica on board in regards to our position on Venezuela and on Cuba. And that was a tough call because Jamaica was very tied in with the Venezuelan oil consortium there, Petrocaribe, and they had good cut rates on Venezuelan crude, and electricity power has always been a really major source of issues in Jamaica. We were lucky to obtain a $1 billion direct foreign investment from Fortress Energy to build a liquid natural gas facility there in past Ocho Rios. So the Chinese thing, we're always in a constant battle, so to speak, with China in regards to economic influence, in regards for lobbying and promoting American businesses versus Chinese. And it's, as I always say, it's a bit of an unfair fight because we had certain rules, the Foreign Corrupt Act and other things that we did not have the leeway of using with Jamaican ministers, for instance, on lobbying for American contracts and certain things. Chinese had much looser rules of engagement, so to speak. So that was a constant battle. Also foreign military sales, foreign military training, FMF and the training we did. Chinese were always looking to sell their hardware to the Jamaican Defense Forces. They wanted always recruiting Jamaican officers to go to China, and we were doing the same thing. But to say we won pretty big time there because all the JDF officers would tell me that American food was a heck of a lot better than the Chinese food. And so was the training, and so was the doctrine, and so is the equipment. So we have some that, but it's a constant battle. You're right about the North-South Highway. China invested in that, but China also promised to build, I believe, the Parliament building as well. But they don't do things for free. They do things for influence. They do things for their own economic development, for their own stranglehold on the Caribbean. The Panama Canal business at the start of the Trump second administration here was quite a battle, and the Panamanians actually ended up rebidding, control of the two portions that were under Chinese control. So yeah, it's a constant battle, and you always have to be on your toes. And American citizens sometimes get into trouble, especially when they go off on their own and wander off from Sandals or any other beautiful all-inclusive
Right.
resorts, and they don't pay attention, don't listen to our, consular advisory announcements. So yeah, it's a pretty full-time big consular section also for visas,
Mm.
non-immigrant visas, immigrant visas, all sorts of things. So very large contingent of junior officers, which to me is always key when you're in a management position of being able to mentor younger officers and help form them and guide them. And so it was a pretty challenging but very pleasant. Jamaica's best natural resource is its people, just wonderful people, and I really enjoyed working with them.
It's interesting to hear kind of how serious the competition is between the US and China in Jamaica and its influence across various different sectors. And in my kind of experience studying Latin America and the Caribbean, it seems that the Caribbean is often kind of cast aside when talking about Latin America as a whole. US experts in the Caribbean often refer to the region as the US's third border. Which countries below the US southern border are a diplomatic priority for the US government, and why?
Yeah, you have some real hot button issues right now. Cuba, for instance.
Mhm.
Uh, we are now virtually blockading Cuba. We've loosened it up slightly, but we've been using a somewhat complex version of old standard gunboat diplomacy.
Mhm.
The the so-called drug extrajudicial killings in the Caribbean on so-called drug boats, which don't have the capacity to reach the United States, and most, if not all of them, are not uh, transporting fentanyl. They're transporting not even cocaine. Uh, if they're transporting anything, it's usually marijuana, as the ships that have uh, floated up to the Guajira Peninsula in Colombia and forensically have been investigated. Uh, and they're doing it without any judicial or war. I mean, if you're doing this as part of a war, those are tantamount almost to war crimes. And if they're doing it as a law enforcement thing, you can consider it extrajudicial killings. So I find that shocking. It's not talked about enough. You have a humanitarian disaster, which is unprecedented. I spent a total of 6 years in Haiti, uh, 2 3 year tours, 10 years apart, and the cycle, it just keeps on going. And you're 50 minutes away from Miami in a flight to Port-au-Prince, but of course, you can't fly into Port-au-Prince right now. And, the administration has just revoked temporary protective status. Hundreds of thousands, excuse me, of Haitians. And I speak to people in Haiti on a regular basis. I attend a Zoom mass in Haiti from Cité Soleil every Sunday that they can broadcast because they often can't because of the conditions. I know a lot of people in the Haitian diaspora. Conditions in Haiti are worse today, right now, at this moment, than they've been in a long, long time. And if you know about Haiti, that's really saying
Yeah.
a lot. And I just don't understand. And this doesn't just go for the Trump administration, that who actually requested and allotted money for the gang suppression force. And here's the thing where there's a wonderful opportunity, a very difficult opportunity, but a very different opportunity for CARICOM. Jamaica taking a lead, Trinidad and Tobago. Jamaican Defense Forces are the most, for me, by far the most professional military force in the Caribbean. JDF, by the way, Jamaican Defense Forces, are the most respected institution in the country. Polling will tell you, at least during the time I was there. Uh, to get involved and actually try to help Haiti. Haiti's the political chaos, the gang violence, starvation is raising its ugly head. We are on the verge of an incredibly unprecedented humanitarian disaster occurring in Haiti. And because, the major networks don't have anchors that travel to Haiti anymore, because you can't even get to Port-au-Prince, it's gone really under the radar. And I think countries in the Caribbean, as well as us, are kind of glad it's under the radar. And I think that's really an incredible tragedy that's undergoing. Is that in U.S. interest? Yes, because potentially you could have a massive migration like we had back in the days, mid 90s. I was the refugee coordinator in Haiti. We with the flotillas that were coming across, there are going to be some very disturbing images and very terrible things that the American public and others are going to see, and that may just kick off a whole bunch of things. And the whole thing, Chinese thing, even Russians were getting involved to a certain extent in Haiti, and certainly the Cubans in Venezuela are another thing. We conducted a magnificent military operation in capturing Maduro, supposedly for drug trafficking reasons, and yet, the same charges that Maduro was charged with. The president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, was convicted on those exact charges. If you read the indictments, they're almost identical, and yet he was pardoned by President Trump and went on and coordinated with the administration the election in Honduras and helped elect the president of Colombia to a certain extent as well with that political action committee they have. So, it's a tinderbox. And I think the administration did well in handling the Panama Canal. I mean, they could have done with a little less threatening of invading Panama, but actually the result of lessening Chinese influence there in the Panama Canal is a good thing. I think the battle goes on. I saw one of your questions that you sent me about the military potential for Chinese bases. China always seems to have had their eye on Goat Island off the coast of Jamaica, which would make a magnificent military base for the Chinese and really give them unprecedented military uh, presence and something to look for. It's also very close to the Panama Canal. So yes, our race with the Chinese and the whole Caribbean is a very tender, delicate spot right now, and I just don't think that people are paying close enough attention to what could possibly happen.
Thank you for that insight. Yeah, I think as a whole, we're not paying attention to the Caribbean enough and kind of understanding its importance in the US context, and seeing how it affects us. It's kind of to focus a little bit more on ports. Last year, CSIS conducted a study of China's port projects in the region and found that the port of Kingston was the riskiest port in their database, which covered over 30 ports in Latin America and the Caribbean. China has been investing in other Caribbean nations through outright ownership or partial ownership through a foreign consortium. So, in your opinion, how does China's trade with Jamaica and the Caribbean as a region impact the US economically?
Well, they're getting all sorts of advantages over us as far as trade, as far as American business opportunities, which keep getting dwarfed by the Chinese business opportunities. Uh, they lull you into a false sense of helping you, but in fact, they're not helping you. They're taking advantage of you. You mentioned the North South Highway from Kingston to Ocho Rios. Uh, they brought in Chinese companies to do that, even Chinese workers. So the effect on the Jamaican economy or the Jamaican employment situation was negated. It really didn't help that at all. Number two, the quality of the road. And I would travel that highway often,
Mhm.
because it made it easy. It made it easier for me to get out to the coast, the other coast. Um, was very poor. I mean, already it was kind of starting to fall apart. So these infrastructure projects are poorly made. They're rapidly put up. There's no quality control. And, you have all these Chinese companies benefiting for that. And it paving the way, no pun intended, paving the way for other Chinese companies to come in and make economic inroads at whose expense? At the United States' expense. And that continues to go on throughout the Caribbean and into Latin America. And they are really beginning their whole diplomatic corps is created in a far more aggressive way than ours. And well, before the Trump administration, I don't know what we're doing now, but very aggressive. You know, these tiger ambassadors, as they're called. The old school guys are out, and when I left a few years ago, the really aggressive younger type ambassadors, Chinese ambassadors were coming. They play hardball. I'm not talking about Jamaica when I give you an example, but say in general, you know, the U.S. ambassador goes in to see the Minister of Commerce or the Minister of Tourism, and he's with an American businessman who has a plan to build a gigantic complex. Well, you know, we can't bring in, or we didn't used to. I mean, we weren't allowed to bring in a suitcase full of cash. The Chinese bring in their virtual, or I think sometimes even real suitcases full of cash, you know, to discuss these things. We couldn't do those things, and that puts us at Savannah. But the Chinese are uh, kind of uh, just on a global basis around Latin America, the Caribbean, extended to Central America, of course, going to South America through diplomacy, through buying their economic power. They control the Colon Free Zone. I mean, Panama is virtually in the Chinese pocket. That's why us getting them to rebid a couple of those contracts. But it's all over Central and South America. And they are in our own hemisphere strangling us economically. And again, I don't see that we're addressing that in the way that perhaps we should be.
Again, it's interesting to see kind of the extent that the Chinese government and these Chinese diplomats are investing in, and almost to a certain extent, even though it's a strong word, exploiting these kind of trade opportunities. I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but just to get a further confirmation, some experts again warn that these maritime ports could be transitioned into naval bases used to safeguard significant trade routes. Kind of what do you say to the validity of this theory?
I think it's a legitimate concern, and as I said, I point out the Chinese interest in Goat Island, supposedly to as another trade opportunity or development, economic development project, but it is the perfect harbor to station Chinese naval vessels at, and can project towards the Panama Canal and so on. I think they want to establish a presence in the New World. I think New World meaning the Western Hemisphere. I do think that it's a real legitimate concern. I think that we're ignoring the Caribbean, and we seem to be all over the map right now. There's doesn't seem to be um, a comprehensive um, plan. I think our foreign policy is very uncoordinated right now, and it's just all over the map. It's reactive. You know, if you looked at the strategic plan, you know, look at the National Security Council is, I think, in disarray. So there's, you know, the Latin American Bureau, all the bureaus, and we've got real estate magnates and the president's son-in-law, you know, as our chief negotiators. And you know, it's like 90 countries that don't have an ambassador, and those that do have ambassadors, like 70% of them are now political appointees. We've lost all our soft power ability when Doge simply just took an eraser and erased USAID. It's very active in the Caribbean. The PEPFAR program, the anti-AIDS program, is doing wonderful work in Jamaica. All that's been erased.
Mhm.
And it's already, you've seen studies done where hundreds of thousands of deaths have occurred because of our soft, or I like to call it smart power, not soft power, because we don't do this just because it's the right thing to do, although it is. You know, these programs help our project our image, help project our presence. It increases our sphere of influence, and all that has gone away. And China has stepped into that void and are doing some of the things. And the loss of USAID projected to account for maybe millions and millions of deaths in Africa and the Caribbean and Latin America. So we don't seem to have any. There's no guiding light. I mean, the Secretary of State is at the same time the National Security Advisor. He's a guy who I personally briefed on USAID programs. He's a big believer in USAID programs, especially when we were helping uh, Venezuelan refugees who were coming to Colombia.
Mhm.
Uh, and yet, we've just deep sixed, USAID. So there's no coordination of U.S. foreign policy, and I think this jointness, and we're just moving pieces across the chessboard without really thinking about it. I think if this continues, we're going to find ourselves in a very outmaneuvered by the Chinese economically, and we're going to be in a very bad place.
I guess we've painted the current state, the current narrative of what's going on in the Caribbean and in context with the US and China, and kind of how we're failing in not having USAID in the region. So my question is, how can the US counteract China's expanding role in the Caribbean? Should the US approach be reactive or proactive? And how does the lack of USAID play in all of this?
Oh, we have to be proactive because we have so many innate advantages. I told you that one of the big things that we should be doing is promoting U.S. military equipment, U.S. military doctrine, U.S. military training, all superior to Chinese in every single way. And working with the military in the different countries in the Caribbean can really be a very positive influence in how they think and how they can reassess what China is doing. We should provide economic development. Some of the USAID programs, people forget, weren't just feeding people or protecting people from disease. A lot of it was economic development in the Caribbean and also in Central America. And those economic development programs in Central America help prevent migration, the very thing that current administration thinks is so important to stop. So uh, being proactive with economic development, engaging with like the International Development Bank and other uh, you know international organizations, instead of making them our enemies or our rivals, we should be embracing these international organizations and helping these countries develop their own economies and their own infrastructure and to be able to help their own people. And the Chinese are not interested in that. The Chinese are interested in helping the Chinese. And we can help people by helping them help themselves. And we do. And then, like I said, it's not all just humanitarian feel good stuff. It's also in our own national interest. We have to be realistic about it.
Thank you so much. I know we were talking a little bit about the North-South Highway that just came into my mind. I believe in my research, I found that the Chinese had established 6 toll kind of posts along this highway. How much of this like infrastructure development and these investments in these maritime ports directly impact the Chinese economy?
I think look, you're taking these Chinese companies, these construction companies, and they're getting massive contracts from the Chinese government and also getting money from the host country as well, directly and indirectly. Yeah, those tolls are amazing. Uh, they were good in a way because it slowed you down. You don't have people crashing into each other.
Right.
Uh, uh, I'm being semi-facetious. Yeah, there there were different rumors about who was getting the money from the tolls.
Mm.
Some people would tell you, oh, it went to the Jamaican government. Other people said it went to the Chinese companies to defray some of the costs because they didn't really charge the Jamaican government for constructing this. Like I said, the Chinese never do anything out of the goodness of their hearts. So yeah, the tolls were. were a subject of very vigorous debate.
Interesting. Thank you so much. And thank you overall for your participation and for joining us today and for your expert analysis on this topic.
Well, I don't know about that, but I've never been afraid to give an opinion. So I continue in that vein. Thank you for giving me a chance to talk to you. It's been a pleasure.